May our Father, Messiah, Holy Spirit rules. Just left the gym, about to read some more. In the 27th year of King Jeroboam of Israel, Azariah, son of King Amaziah of Judah, became king. He was 16 years old when he became king, and he reigned 52 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Jecholiah of Jerusalem. He did what was pleasing to our Father in heaven, just as his father Amaziah had done. However, the shrines were not removed. The people continued to sacrifice and make offerings at the shrines. Our Father in heaven struck the king with a plague, and he was leper until the day of his death. He lived in isolated quarters, while Jotham, the king's son, was in charge of the palace and governed the people of the land. The other events of Azariah's reign and all his actions are recorded in the annals of the kings of Jehudah. Azariah slept with his fathers, and he was buried with his fathers in the city of David. His son Jotham succeeded him as king. In the 38th year of King Azariah of Jehudah, Zechariah, son of Jeroboam, became king over Israel and Samaria for 6 months. He did what was displeasing to our Father in heaven. As his fathers had done, he did not depart from the sins which Jeroboam, son of Nebat, had caused Israel to commit. Shalom, son of Jabesh, conspired against him and struck him down before the people and killed him and succeeded him as king. The other events of Zechariah's reign are recorded in the annals of the kings of Israel. This was in accord with the word that our Father in heaven has spoken to Jehu. 4 generations of your descendants shall occupy the throne of Israel. And so it came about. Shalom, son of Jabesh, Shalom, son of Jabesh, became king in the 39th year of King Uzziah of Jehudah, and he reigned in Samaria 1 month. Then Menahem, son of Gadai, set out from Tirzah and came to Samaria. He attacked Shalom, son of Jabesh, in Samaria and killed him, and he succeeded him as king. The other events of Shalom's reign and the conspiracy that he formed are recorded in the annals of the kings of Israel. At that time, marching from Tirzah, Menahem subdued Tifsah and all who were in it, in his territory, and because it did not surrender, he massacred his people and ripped open all his pregnant women. I could just do this. And ripped open all his pregnant women. In the 39th year of King Azariah of Jehudah, Menahem, son of Gadai, became king over Israel and Samaria for 10 years. He did what was displeasing to our Father in heaven throughout his days. He did not depart from the sins which Jeroboam, son of Nebat, had caused Israel to commit. King Pul of Azariah invaded the land, and Menahem gave Pul 1,000 talents of silver that he might support him and strengthen his hold on the kingdom. Menahem exacted the money from Israel. Every man of means had to pay 50 shekels of silver for the king of Assyria. The king of Assyria withdrew and did not remain in the land. The other events of Menahem's reign and all his actions are recorded in the annals of the kings of Israel. Menahem slept with his fathers, and his son Pekahiah succeeded him as king. In the 50th year of King Azariah of Jehudah, Pekahiah, son of Menahem, became king over Israel and Samaria for 2 years. He did what was displeasing to our Father in heaven. He did not depart from the sins which Jeroboam, son of Nebat, had caused Israel to commit. His aide, Pekah, son of Remaliah, conspired against him and struck him down in the royal palace in Samaria. With him were 50 Geladites, with men from Argob and Ariah, and he killed him and succeeded him as king. The other events of Pekah's reign and all his actions are recorded in the annals of the kings of Israel. In the 52nd year of King Azariah of Jehudah, Pekah, son of Remaliah, became king over Israel and Samaria for 20 years. He did what was displeasing to our Father in heaven. He did not depart from the sins which Jeroboam, son of Nebat, had caused Israel to commit. In the days of King Pekah of Israel, King Tiglath-Pileser of Assyria came and captured Aijan, Abel, Beth-Makkah, Jonah, Kadesh, Hazor, Gilead, Galileo, the entire region of Naphtali, and he deported the inhabitants of Assyria. Hoshea, son of Eli, conspired against Pekah, son of Remaliah, attacked him and killed him. He succeeded him as king in the 20th year of Jotham, son of Uzziah. The other events of Pekah's reign and all his actions are recorded in the annals of the kings of Israel. In the 2nd year of King Pekah, son of Remaliah of Israel, Jotham, son of King Uzziah of Judah, became king. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned 16 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Jersha, daughter of Zadok. He did what was pleasing to our Father in heaven. I don't know why I keep getting his words mixed up. He did what was pleasing to our Father in heaven, just as his father Uzziah had done. However, the shrines were not removed. The people continued to sacrifice and make offerings at the shrines. It was he who built the upper gate of the house of our Father in heaven. The other events of Jotham's reign and all his actions are recorded in the annals of the kings of Jehudah. In those days, our Father in heaven began to incite King Rezin of Aram and Pekah, son of Remaliah, against Jehudah. Yatham slept with his fathers, and he was buried with his fathers in the city of his ancestor David. His son Ahaz succeeded him as king. In the 17th year of Pekah, son of Remaliah, Ahaz, son of King Jotham of Jehudah, became king. Ahaz was 20 years old when he became king, and he reigned 16 years in Jerusalem. He did not do what was pleasing to our Father in heaven, his Elohim, as his ancestor David had done, but followed the ways of the kings of Israel. He even consigned his son to the fire in the abhorrent fashion of the nations which our Father in heaven had dispossessed before the Israelites. He sacrificed and made offerings at the shrines on the hills and under every leafy tree. Then King Rezin of Aram and King Pekah, son of Remaliah of Israel, advanced on Jerusalem for battle. They besieged Ahaz, but could not overcome him. At that time, King Rezin of Aram recovered Elath for Aram. He drove out the Judites from Elath. When Edomites came to Elath and settled there, as is still the case, Ahaz sent messengers to King Tiglath-Pileser of Assyria to say, I am your servant and your son. Come and deliver me from the hands of the king of Aram and from the hands of the king of Israel who are attacking me. Ahaz took the gold and silver that were on hand in the house of our Father in heaven and in the treasuries of the royal palace, and sent them as a gift to the king of Assyria. The king of Assyria responded to his request. The king of Assyria marched against Damascus and captured it. He deported its inhabitants to Kir and put Rezin to death. When King Ahaz went to Damascus to greet King Tiglath-Pileser of Assyria, he saw the altar in Damascus. King Ahaz sent the priest Uriah a sketch of the altar and a detailed plan of its construction. The priest Uriah did just as King Ahaz had instructed him from Damascus. The priest Uriah built the altar before King Ahaz returned from Damascus. When the king returned from Damascus, and when the king saw the altar, the king drew near the altar, ascended it, and offered his burnt offering and meal offering. He poured his libation, and he dashed the blood of his offering of well-being against the altar. As for the bronze altar, which had been before our Father in heaven, he moved it from its place in front of the temple between the new altar and the house of our Father in heaven, and placed it on the north side of the new altar. And King Ahaz commanded the priest Uriah, on the great altar, you shall offer the morning burnt offering and in the evening meal offering, and the king's burnt offering and his meal offering, with the burnt offerings of all the people of the land, their meal offerings and their libations, and against it you shall dash the blood of all the burnt offerings and all the blood of the sacrifices, and I will decide about the bronze altar. Uriah did just as King Ahaz commanded. King Ahaz cut off the insets, the laver stands, and removed the lavers from them. He also removed the tank from the bronze oxen that supported it, and set it on a stone pavement. On account of the king of Assyria, he also extended to the house of our Father in heaven the Sabbath passage that had been built in the palace and the king's outer entrance. The other events of Ahaz's reign and his actions are recorded in the annals of the kings of Yehuda. Ahaz slept with his fathers and was buried with his fathers in the city of David. His son Hezekiah succeeded him as king. In the 12th year of King Ahaz of Jehuda, Hoshea, son of Eli, became king over Israel and Samaria for 9 years. He did what was displeasing to our Father in heaven, though not as much as the kings of Israel who preceded him. King Shalmaneser marched against him, and Hoshea became his vassal and paid him tribute. But the king of Assyria caught Hoshea in an act of treachery. He had sent envoys to King So of Mizraim, and that's Egypt, and he had not paid the tribute to the king of Assyria as in previous years. And the king of Assyria arrested him and put him in prison. Then the king of Assyria marched against the whole land. He came to Samaria and besieged it for 3 years. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria captured Samaria. He deported the Israelites to Assyria and settled them in Halah, at the river Habor, at the river Gozan, and in the towns of Midian. This happened because the Israelites sinned against our Father in heaven, their Elohim, who had freed them from the land of Mizraim, from the hand of Pharaoh, king of Mizraim. They worshipped other mighty ones and followed the customs of the nations which our Father in heaven had dispossessed for the Israelites, and the customs which the kings of Israel had practiced. The Israelites committed against our Father in heaven their Elohim acts which were not right. They built for themselves shrines and other settlements, from watchtowers to fortified cities. They set up pillars and sacred posts for themselves on every lofty hill and under every leafy tree, and they offered sacrifices there at all the shrines, like the nations whom our Father in heaven had driven into exile before them. They committed wicked acts to vex our Father in heaven, and they worshipped fetishes, concerning which our Father in heaven had said to them, you must not do this thing. Our Father in heaven warned Israel and Jehudah by every prophet and every seer, saying, turn back from your wicked ways and observe my commandments and my laws according to all the teaching that I commanded your fathers and that I transmitted to you through my servants the prophets. But they did not obey. They stiffened their necks like their fathers who did not have faith in our Father in heaven, their Elohim. They spurned his laws and the covenant that he had made with their fathers and the warnings he had given them. They went after delusion and were deluded. They imitated the nations that were about them, which our Father in heaven had forbidden them to emulate. They rejected all the commandments of our Father in heaven, their Elohim. They made molten idols for themselves to cast, and they made a sacred post, and they bowed down to all the hosts of heaven, and they worshipped Baal. They consigned their sons and daughters to the fire. They practiced augury and divination, and gave themselves over to what was displeasing to our Father in heaven, and vexed him. Our Father in heaven was incensed at Israel, and he banished them from his presence. None was left but the tribe of Jehudah alone. Nor did Jehudah keep the commandments of our Father in heaven, their Elohim. They followed the custom to Israel had practiced, so our Father in heaven spurned all the offspring of Israel, and he afflicted them and delivered them into the hands of plunderers, and finally he cast them out from his presence. Wow, he actually cast us out from his presence. I actually don't even remember this, family. This is something serious. For Israel broke away from the house of David, and they made Jeroboam, son of Nebat, king. Jeroboam caused Israel to stray from our Father in heaven to commit and to it says King Jeroboam caused Israel to stray from our Father in heaven and to commit great sin, and the Israelites persisted in all the sin which Jeroboam had committed. They did not depart from them. In the end, our Father in heaven removed Israel from his presence, as he had warned them through all his servants, the prophets. So the Israelites were deported from the land to Assyria, as is still the case. So it says this is still the case. The king of Assyria brought people from Babylon, Kudath, Ava, Hamath, and Saravaim, and he settled them in the towns of Samaria in place of the Israelites. They took possession of Samaria and dwelt in its towns. When they first settled there, they did not worship our Father in heaven. So our Father in heaven set lions against them, which killed some of them. They said to the king of Assyria, the nations which you deported and resettled in the towns of Samaria do not know the rules of the Elohim of the land. Therefore he has let lions loose against them, which are killing them, for they do not know the rules of the Elohim of the land. The king of Assyria gave an order, send there one of the priests whom you have deported, let him go and dwell there, and let him teach them the practices of the Elohim of the land. So one of the priests whom they had exiled from Samaria came and settled in Bethel. He taught them how to worship our Father in heaven. However, each nation continued to make its own mighty ones and to set them in the cold places which had been made by the people of Samaria. Each nation set them up in the towns in which it lived. The Babylonians made Succoth, Banath, and the men of Koth made Nergal, and the men of Hamath made Ashima, and the Avites made Nibhaz and Tartak, and the Severites burned their children as offerings to Adramelech and Anamelech, the mighty ones of Sepharvaim. They worship our Father in heaven, but they also appointed from their own ranks priests of the shrines who officiated for them in the cold places. They worshipped our Father in heaven while serving their own mighty ones according to the practices of the nations in which they have been deported to this day. They follow their former practices. They do not worship our Father in heaven properly. They do not follow the laws and practices, the teaching and instruction that our Father in heaven enjoined upon the descendants of Jacob, who was given the name Israel, with whom he made a covenant, and whom he commanded, you shall worship no other mighty ones. You shall not bow down to them, nor serve them, nor sacrifice to them. You must worship only our Father in heaven, your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim with great might and with great might and with an outstretched arm. To him alone shall you bow down, and to him alone shall you sacrifice. You shall observe faithfully all your days the laws and the practices, the teaching and the instruction I wrote down for you. Do not worship other mighty ones. Do not forget the covenant that I made with you. Do not worship other mighty ones. Worship only our Father in heaven, your Elohim, and he will save you from the hands of all your enemies. But they did not obey. They continued their former practices. Those nations worshipped our Father in heaven, but they also served their idols to this day. The children and their children's children do as their ancestors did. Wow, that's why we had to come out of that. Come out of her. This is sad. In the 3rd year of King Hoshea, son of Eli of Israel, Hezekiah, son of King Ahaz of Jehudah, became king. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 29 years. His mother's name was Abiah, daughter of Zechariah. He did what was pleasing to our Father in heaven. Just as his father David had done, he abolished the shrines and smashed the pillars and cut down the sacred posts. He also broke into pieces the bronze serpent that Moshe had made, for until that time the Israelites had been offering sacrifice to it. It was called Nebuchadnezzar. He trusted only in our Father in heaven, the Elohim of Israel. There was none like him among all the kings of Jehudah after him, nor among those before him. He clung to our Father in heaven. He did not turn away from following him, but kept the commandments that our Father in heaven had given to Moshe, and our Father in heaven was with him. He was successful wherever he turned. He rebelled against the king of Assyria and would not serve him. He overran Philistia as far as Gaza and its border areas, from marched toward the fortified town in the 4th year of King Hezekiah, which was the 7th year of King Hoshea, son of Eli of Israel. King Shalmaneser of Assyria marched against Samaria and besieged it, and he captured it at the end of the year. In the 6th year of Hezekiah, which was the 9th year of King Hoshea of Israel, Samaria was captured, and the king of Assyria deported the Israelites to Assyria. He settled them in Allah along the Habor and the river Gozan, and in the towns of Midian. This happened because they did not obey our Father in heaven, their Elohim. They transgressed his covenant, all that Moshe, the servant of our Father in heaven, had commanded. They did not obey, and they did not fulfill it. In the 14th year of King Hezekiah, King Sennacherib of Assyria marched against all the fortified towns of Jehudah and seized them. King Hezekiah sent this message to the king of Assyria at Lachish: I have done wrong, withdraw from me, and I shall bear whatever you impose on me. So the king of Assyria imposed upon King Hezekiah of Judah a payment of 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. Hezekiah gave him all the silver that was on hand, and in the house of our Father in heaven, and in the treasuries of the palace. At that time Hezekiah cut down the doors and the doorposts of the temple of our Father in heaven, which King Hezekiah had overlaid with gold, and gave them to the king of Assyria. But the king of Assyria sent the Tartan, the Rabsaris, and the Rabshakeh from Lachish with a large force to King Hezekiah in Jerusalem. They marched up to Jerusalem, and when they arrived, they took up a position at the conduit of the upper pool by the road of the fuller's field. They summoned the king and Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, who was in charge of the palace. Shebna the scribe and Joah, son of Asaph, the recorder, went out to them. The Rabshakeh said to them, Eat to Hezekiah, thus said the great king, the king of Assyria. What makes you so confident? You must think that mere talk is counsel and valor for war. Look, on whom are you relying that you have rebelled against me? You rely of all things on Egypt, Mitzrayim, that splintered reed of a staff, which enters and punctures the palm of anyone who leans on it. That's what Pharaoh, king of Mitzrayim, is like to all who rely on him. And if you tell me that you are relying on our Father in heaven, your Elohim, he is the very one whose shrines and altars Hezekiah did away with, telling Jehudah and Jerusalem, you must worship only at this altar in Jerusalem. Come now, make this wager with my master, the king of Assyria. I give you 2,000 horses if you can produce riders to mount them. So how could you refuse anything, even to the deputy of one of my master's lesser servants, relying on Mitzrayim for chariots and horsemen? And do you think I have marched against this land to destroy it with our Father in heaven? Our Father in heaven himself told me, go up against that land and destroy it. Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, Shebniah, and Joah replied to the Rabshakeh, please speak to your servants in Aramaic, for we understand it. Do not speak to us in Judean in the hearing of the people on the wall. But the Rabshakeh answered them, was it to your master and to you that my master sent me to speak those words? It was precisely to the men who are sitting on the wall, who will have to eat their dung and drink their urine with you. And the Rabshakeh stood and called out in a loud voice in Judean, hear the words of the great king, the king of Assyria. Thus said the king, don't let Hezekiah deceive you, for he will not be able to deliver you from my hands. Don't let Hezekiah make you rely on our Father in heaven, saying, our Father in heaven will surely save us. This city will not fall into the hands of the king of Assyria. Don't listen to Hezekiah, for thus said the king of Assyria, make your peace with me and come out to me, so that you may all eat from your vines and your fig trees, and drink water from your cisterns, until I come and take you away to a land like your own, a land of grain, fields and vineyards, of bread and wine, of olive oil and honey, so that you may live and not die. Don't listen to Hezekiah, who misleads you by saying, our Father in heaven will save you. Did any of the mighty ones of other nations save this land from the king of Assyria? Where were the mighty ones of Hamath and Arpad? Where were the mighty ones of Sepharvaim and Not and Abai? And did they save Samaria from me? Which among all the mighty ones of those countries saved their countries from me, that our Father never should save Jerusalem from me? But the people were silent and did not say a word in reply, for the king's order was, do not answer him. And so Eliakim, son of Hilkiah, who was in charge of the palace, Shebna the scribe, and Joah, son of Asaph, the recorder, came to Hezekiah with their clothes rent, and they reported to him what the Rabshakeh had said. When King Hezekiah heard this, he rent his clothes and covered himself with sackcloth and went into the house of our Father in heaven. He also sent Eliakim, who was in charge of the palace, Shebna the scribe, and the senior priest covered with sackcloth to the prophet Isaiah, son of Amoz. They said to him, thus said Hezekiah, this day is a day of distress, of chastisement, and of disgrace. The babes have reached the birth stool, but the strength to give birth is lacking. Perhaps our Father in heaven, your Elohim, will take note of all the words of the Rabshakeh, whom his master, the king of Assyria, has sent to blaspheme the living Elohim, and will mete out judgment for the words that our Father in heaven, your Elohim, has heard, if you will offer a prayer for the surviving remnant. When King Hezekiah's ministers came to Isaiah, Isaiah said to them, tell your master as follows, thus said our Father in heaven, do not be frightened by the words of the blasphemy against me that you have heard from the minions of the king of Assyria. I will delude him. He will hear a rumor and return to his land, and I will make him fall by the sword in his land. The Rabshakeh meanwhile heard that the king had left Lachish. He turned back and found the king of Assyria attacking Libnah, but the king of Assyria learned that King Tirhakah of Nubiah had come out to fight him, so he again sent messengers to Hezekiah, saying, tell this to King Hezekiah of Jehudah, do not let your Elohim, on whom you are relying, mislead you into thinking that Jerusalem would not be delivered into the hands of the king of Assyria. You yourself have heard what the kings of Assyria have done to all the lands, how they have annihilated them, and can you escape? Or the nations that my predecessors destroyed, Gozan, Haran, Rezpha, and the Beth Edenites in Tel Esser, saved by the mighty ones? Where is the king of Hamath? and the king of Arpad, and the kings of Lair, Sepharvaim, Hannah, and Eva. Hezekiah took the letter from the messengers and read it. Hezekiah then went up to the house of our Father in heaven, and spread it out before our Father in heaven. And Hezekiah prayed to our Father in heaven and said, O our Father in heaven, the post enthroned on the cherubim, you alone are Elohim of all the kingdoms of the earth. You made the heavens and the earth. O our Father in heaven, incline your ear and hear. Open your eyes and see. Hear the words that Sennacherib has sent to blaspheme the living Elohim. True, O our Father in heaven, the kings of Assyria have annihilated the nations in their lands, and have committed their mighty ones to the flames, and have destroyed them, for they are not mighty ones, but man's handiwork of wood and stone. But now, O our Father in heaven, our Elohim, deliver us from his hands, and let all the kingdoms of the earth know that you alone, O our Father in heaven, our Elohim. Then Isaiah, son of Amoz, sent this message to Hezekiah. Thus said our Father in heaven to Elohim and Israel, I have heard the prayer you have offered to me concerning the king Sennacherib of Assyria. This is the word that our Father in heaven has spoken concerning him. Fair maiden Zion despises you, she mocks at you. Fair Jerusalem shakes her head at you. Whom have you blasphemed and reviled against? Who made loud your voice and haughtily raised your eyes against the Holy One of Israel? Through your envoys you have blasphemed my master, because you thought, thanks to my vast territory, it is I who have climbed the highest mountains to the remotest parts of the Lebanon, and have cut down its loftiest cedars, its choicest cypresses, and have reached its remotest lodge, its densest forest. And it is I who have drawn and drunk the waters of strangers. I have dried up with the soles of my feet all the streams of Mitzrayim. Have you not heard? Of old I planned that very thing. I designed it long ago, and now I have fulfilled it, and it has come to pass. Laying waste fortified towns and desolate heaps, their inhabitants are helpless, dismayed, and shamed. They were but grass of the field and green herbage, grass of the roofs that is blasted before the stadium grain. I know your stayings and your goings and comings, and how you have raged against me, because you have raged against me, and your tumult has reached my ears. I will place my hook in your nose, in my bit between your jaws, and I will make you go back by the road by which you came. And this is the sign for you. This year you eat what grows of itself, and the next year what springs from that, and in the third year sow and reap and plant vineyards and eat their fruit. And the survivors of the house of Jehudah that have escaped shall regenerate its slack below and produce bows above. For a remnant shall come forth from Jerusalem, survivors from Mount Zion. The zeal of our Father in heaven of hosts shall bring this to pass. Assuredly thus said our Father in heaven concerning the king of Assyria. He shall not enter this city, he shall not shoot an arrow at it, or advance upon it with a shield, or pile up a siege mount against it. He shall go back by the way he came. He shall not enter this city, declares our Father in heaven. I will protect and save the city for my sake, and for the sake of my servant David. That night an angel of our Father in heaven went on and struck down 185,000 in the Assyrian camp. And the following morning they were all dead corpses. So King Sennacherib of Assyria broke camp and retreated and stayed in Nineveh, while he was worshipping in the temple of his mighty one in Sarat. His sons Adramelech and Sarezer struck him down with the sword. They fled to the land of Ararat, and his son Esarhaddon succeeded him as king. May our Father Messiah was good with us. I pray that this was edifying reading for you, was edifying reading for me. I pray you have a great and wonderful, beautiful, and blessed day. I thank you, Father Messiah, Spirit, for allowing me to even be able to read, to see, to breathe, to speak. And I thank you for allowing me to have a sound body and a sound mind. It's truly a blessing. Amen. Our Father who is in the heavens, let your name be set apart. Let your reign come. Let your desire be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. Do not lead us into trial, but deliver us from the wicked one. That yours is the reign and power and the strength forever. Amen. Peace, family. I love you all. Amen.